You and that boy of yours have always been a burden." Her words hung in the air, meant to shatter me. For a second, I felt the crack, but it wasn't my heart breaking. It was the seal on a promise I made to myself. Hello, everyone. My name is Deborah Pearson. I'm 38 years old, and I'm an architectural project manager here in beautiful Charleston, South Carolina. I've built a life I'm proud of, a safe home for myself and my 2-year-old son, Michael. But a few weeks ago, across a polished mahogany dining table that smelled of lemon oil and old money, my entire world was threatened by the very people who were supposed to build me up. My mother, Mildred, looked at me, her smile as thin and sharp as a shard of glass. "After all we did for you," she said, her voice dripping with disdain, "you show up acting high and mighty. You and that boy of yours have always been a burden." My father, Walter, simply nodded, adding, "We're your family. The money you have is our success, too. You owe us." I didn't scream. I didn't even flinch. I just met their gaze and delivered a single sentence that sucked all the air out of the room. They thought they could break me, but they forgot they'd already done that 20 years ago, and I had rebuilt myself with steel. To understand the decision I made in that moment, you need to know how they drew first blood. It all started when I was 18, with a little white cottage on Folly Beach and a promise from my grandmother. That cottage wasn't just wood and nails. It was my inheritance, my future, and the last piece of unconditional love I had left in the world. It was valued at around $250,000, but to me, it was priceless. It was my freedom. And they convinced me to set it on fire. They didn't literally hand me a match, of course. They were far more insidious than that. They did it with words, wrapped in the language of family obligation. My brother, Roger, their golden child, had a brilliant idea, or so they called it. He wanted to launch a luxury yacht tour company catering to Charleston's elite tourists. It was a sure thing, my father Walter insisted, his eyes gleaming with ambition. "This will elevate the Pearson name for generations," my mother Mildred added, placing a hand on my arm. They needed capital, a significant investment to buy the first boat and secure the permits. My cottage was the key. "It's for the family, Deborah," Mildred would say, her voice soft and persuasive. "A rising tide lifts all boats. We'll pay you back double within 2 years, I promise." I was 18. I wanted to believe them. I wanted to be a part of the family's success, not an obstacle to it. So I signed the papers, watching my sanctuary, my grandmother's legacy, get converted into cash. That cash went straight into Roger's business, which sank faster than a stone. He spent lavishly on marketing and parties but neglected the actual business. 18 months later, it was all gone. When I cautiously asked my parents about the money they promised, my father just scoffed. "Business is risky, Deborah. You knew that. Don't be naive." My mother wouldn't even look at me. There was no apology, no remorse, just cold, hard silence. I realized then that I wasn't their daughter. I was just a resource they had depleted. So, with $300 saved from a summer job and a heart fractured into a million pieces, I packed one duffel bag and walked out their front door. No one tried to stop me. The silence that followed my departure was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. No calls, no texts. It was as if I had simply ceased to exist. At 18, alone in a city that suddenly felt enormous, I learned a brutal lesson. The only person I could truly count on was myself. So, I got to work. I enrolled in community college before transferring to Clemson for their architecture program, burying myself in student loan applications. To survive, I worked 3 jobs. By day, I was a hostess at a restaurant in the French Quarter, smiling at tourists while my feet screamed in pain. By night, I shelved books at the college library, the quiet hum of the building, a strange comfort. On weekends, I'd lead historical walking tours, repeating stories of Charleston's past while desperately trying to build my own future. There were nights I'd fall asleep on a lumpy mattress, too exhausted to even boil water for ramen noodles. My diet consisted of cheap coffee and the sheer, stubborn spite of wanting to prove them wrong. My family's betrayal became the fuel that burned away my exhaustion. I clawed my way through every exam, every project, every soul-crushing shift. The day I graduated and got my first job offer from a respected firm, I didn't cry with joy. I just felt a profound, quiet sense of relief, like I could finally take a full breath for the first time in years. I eventually got married, had my wonderful son Michael, and when that marriage ended, I handled it with the same grit I'd learned to cultivate. I packed his bags and moved on. I didn't need a man to save me. And 5 years ago, I signed the mortgage on my own house in Mount Pleasant, a testament to every sacrifice, every sleepless night. Tell me in the comments below about a time you had to be your own hero, because I think we all have that strength inside us, waiting for a reason to ignite. For years, I had found my peace. My life revolved around a steady, comforting rhythm, work projects, soccer practice with Michael on weekends, and Friday night pizza and movie marathons. The chaos of my past had faded into a dull, distant ache. My parents had become ghosts in my life, appearing only as a hollow happy birthday text or a generic Christmas card signed only by my mother. There was never an apology, never a question about how I was really doing. Their silence was a gift I had gratefully accepted. And then, one quiet Tuesday evening, the ghost came back to haunt me. I was at the kitchen island, helping Michael with his pre-algebra homework, when my phone buzzed. The name Mildred flashed on the screen, and my stomach instantly tightened into a familiar knot of dread. I hadn't spoken to her in almost a year. I let it ring, my thumb hovering over the decline button. But a flicker of something, maybe morbid curiosity, maybe the last shred of daughterly duty, made me answer. Her voice was unrecognizable. It wasn't the sharp, critical tone I knew. It was fragile, trembling, and thick with a performance of despair. "Deborah," she choked out. "It's your father. His heart. He's very sick." I froze, the pencil in my hand snapping in two. Before I could process the news, she got to the real point. "And the house. The bank is threatening to foreclose. We're in trouble, honey. Your father's last business venture with Roger, we're $450,000 in debt." There it was. The other shoe. It was never just about concern. It was always about a crisis. "Please," she whispered, the desperation sounding almost real. "You're our only hope. We need you to come home." The word home echoed in my ear, a bitter, ironic sting. She wasn't inviting me home. She was summoning me to a cleanup site. Against my better judgment, I went. I told my best friend Lorraine it wasn't for them, it was for me. It was to close a chapter I had left open for 20 years. I arranged for Michael to stay with a neighbor, took a few days off work, and flew back into the humid Charleston air that felt heavy with memories. The family home, a historic single house south of Broad Street, looked the same, but the feeling was different. It felt like a museum of a life I'd never truly been a part of. The first evening, they suggested a proper family dinner. I knew it was a stage, and I was the main character in a play I hadn't auditioned for. The table was set with their best china, a performance of the civility we never had. My brother Roger strolled in late, a smirk playing on his lips, and my mother immediately began fussing over him. The small talk was excruciating. They asked about my job in the way one discusses the weather, with detached curiosity and no real interest. Then, my father cleared his throat, the sound echoing in the tense silence. "Deborah, let's not waste time," he said, his voice flat. "The bank is not flexible. We owe $450,000, and we are out of options." I met his gaze, my own voice steady. "I understand the situation is serious. What do you intend to do?" My mother jumped in, her frail act vanishing. "The plan is you, Deborah," she said, her tone sharp as a knife. "The plan is that you will fix this." Roger leaned back in his chair, looking smug. "Think of it as retroactive family support," he added. "You're doing well for yourself. It's time you paid it forward to the people who got you there." The audacity of it, the complete revision of history, left me breathless. I took a slow sip of water, my mind racing. I placed my hands flat on the table, a strange sense of calm washing over me. "The life I have," I began, my voice even, "is one I built from the ashes of a future you took from me. I have a mortgage on a home I earned. I have a son, Michael, and his future is my absolute priority. My money, the money I worked for while you were ignoring my existence, is for my family. The word "my" hung in the air like a declaration of war. My father's face turned a deep, blotchy red. Your family? He boomed, slamming his fist on the table. We are your family. You have always been a selfish child, thinking only of yourself. Roger chimed in. She's right, Dad. She's forgotten where she comes from. But it was my mother who delivered the final, fatal blow. She leaned forward, her face a mask of cold fury, and the fake fragility was gone. He's right, she hissed, her voice low and venomous. After all we did for you, you show up acting high and mighty. You and that boy of yours have always been a burden. That single word burden, it didn't just hurt me, it detonated something deep inside. They could attack me, but they would not touch my son. The fire of my anger cooled instantly, leaving behind something much colder, much harder. I slowly pushed my chair back, the legs scraping against the hardwood floor. I stood up, looked each of them directly in the eye, and let the silence stretch. Then, I said the words that would change everything. I see. In that case, I'll be handling the matter of the house myself. You'll be hearing from my lawyer. I turned and walked out, leaving them sitting in a stunned, suffocating silence, the scent of their ruined dinner party hanging in the air. I drove back to my hotel in a daze, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. The first call I made was to Lorraine, my best friend. After I relayed the entire ugly conversation, she was quiet for a moment before saying, "Good, the mask is finally off. Now they know who they're dealing with." I thought that night was the climax of the battle, but it turned out to be just the opening skirmish. My mother's next move was something I never could have anticipated. 2 days later, my phone started buzzing uncontrollably. Texts, Facebook messages, missed calls. A friend from high school sent me a link with the simple message, "You need to see this." It was a Facebook Live video from my mother's account. There she was, sitting in a dimly lit living room, wearing a soft, pitiable-looking sweater, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. She spoke in a trembling voice about my father's failing health, their financial fears, and then the ultimate betrayal from her cold, successful daughter. But the part that made my blood run cold was when she held up a framed school picture of my son, Michael. "She's not just punishing us," Mildred cried to her audience of sympathetic friends. "She's punishing her own son by teaching him to turn his back on his family. She's keeping my grandson from me." It was a masterpiece of manipulation, and it worked. Messages flooded in from people I hadn't spoken to in years, calling me heartless, a disgrace. They had made me the villain in a story I never wrote. Have you ever had your truth stolen and twisted by someone you were supposed to trust? It's a unique kind of violation, isn't it? That night, staring at the screen, I realized setting boundaries wasn't enough. This was war. I called Lorraine back. "She wants to play dirty," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "Fine, let's burn it all down." My mother wanted a public war, but I wasn't going to fight her on her turf. As Lorraine wisely said, "You don't wrestle with a pig in the mud. You'll both get dirty, but only the pig enjoys it." So, we moved the battlefield. The target wasn't her reputation, it was her leverage. The house. That historic home was the foundation of their identity, their status in the Charleston community, and the last thing they had any claim to. My plan was simple and ruthless. I wouldn't be fighting my parents, I'd be dealing with their bank. Lorraine, a financial advisor with the mind of a shark, made the first call. With the house already in pre-foreclosure, the bank was highly motivated. They didn't want the headache of a messy eviction and a public auction. We made them an offer. A direct buyout of the entire $450,000 note. It was a clean, swift solution for them, and for me, it was the ultimate power play. The next week was a blur of phone calls with lawyers, financial transfers, and paperwork. I liquidated a portion of my investment portfolio and secured a bridge loan, moving with the same efficiency I used to manage a multi-million-dollar construction project. I wasn't an emotional daughter seeking revenge. I was a businesswoman closing a deal. There was no room for hesitation. As I sat in a lawyer's sterile conference room, the final closing documents spread before me, my hand didn't shake. I thought of the little girl who cried over her grandmother's lost cottage. I thought of the 18-year-old who walked out into the night with nothing. And with a steady, deliberate stroke of the pen, I signed my name. The ink was dry. The war wasn't over, but I now owned the ground it was being fought on. Holding the deed to that house felt heavy. It wasn't a trophy, it was a weapon, and I intended to wield it with surgical precision. My next meeting was with my attorney. Together, we drafted 2 documents that would rewrite the rules of my entire existence. The first was a cease and desist letter demanding the immediate removal of the defamatory Facebook Live video. It stated, in no uncertain terms, that any further public comments would be met with a lawsuit. The second document was the real masterstroke. It was a formal contract outlining their new reality. I wasn't kicking them out. I was giving them a choice, the kind of choice they had never given me. They could remain in the house, my house, as tenants. The terms were simple. They would sign a formal lease agreement and a separate, ironclad contract to repay the full $450,000 debt directly to me, with interest, over the next 10 years. One missed payment, 1 day late, and eviction proceedings would begin automatically. It wasn't about the money. It was about forcing them, for the first time in their lives, to be accountable. I didn't call them. I didn't drive over to watch their faces crumble. I had the papers delivered by a legal process server. It was a cold, impersonal, business transaction. 3 hours later, my phone rang. It was Mildred, and she was screaming. "You think you can control us with your money? How dare you humiliate your father like this?" I let her shriek, her words washing over me. When she finally paused to breathe, I replied, my voice quiet and clear. "It's not about control, Mildred. It's a contract. You have 30 days to sign or vacate the property. The choice is yours." Then I hung up. There's a strange clarity, isn't there, when you finally stop playing by someone else's toxic rules and start writing your own? The 30 days came and went in a tense silence. As I expected, their pride was worth more to them than a roof over their heads. My lawyer confirmed on the final day they had vacated the property. They refused to sign, choosing homelessness over accountability. A week later, I flew back to Charleston to walk through the empty house. The silence was absolute, broken only by the echo of my own footsteps on the bare hardwood floors. It felt like walking through a shipwreck. They had left in a rage, leaving behind trails of their bitterness. Half-full trash bags on the kitchen floor, deep scuff marks on the walls from hastily moved furniture, a single cracked teacup on the mantelpiece. It was a final, petty act of defiance. My plan was to have a cleaning crew come in, but first, I needed to do one last sweep myself. I pulled down the rickety stairs to the attic, a place I hadn't set foot in since I was a teenager. The air was thick with the smell of dust and cedar. In the far corner, under an old, moth-eaten quilt, was a small, wooden keepsake box with my grandmother's initials elegantly carved into the lid. My heart skipped a beat. Inside, nestled amongst some old photographs and a tarnished silver locket, was an envelope. It was made of thick, creamy stationery, and on the front, in my grandmother's unmistakable cursive, were the words, "For my Deborah, to be opened on your 18th birthday." I sank down onto the dusty floorboards, my legs suddenly weak. I was 38. This letter had been sitting here, hidden, for 20 years. The betrayal I felt wasn't just about money anymore. It was about stolen words, stolen wisdom, a final goodbye I was never allowed to have. With trembling hands, I broke the seal. The old paper was fragile in my hands, and as I unfolded it, the faint scent of my grandmother's lavender perfume filled the dusty air. Her handwriting, a beautiful, strong, cursive, flowed across the page. "My dearest Deborah," it began, "if you are reading this on your 18th birthday, it means I am gone, but I want you to know I am at peace. I am leaving you the little cottage on Folly Beach, and I need you to understand that this is more than just a house. It is a key." My breath hitched. She continued, I love your mother and father, but I have never been blind. Your father, Walter, has a pride that costs him dearly, and your mother, Mildred, enables his worst impulses to protect their image. They are not careful with money, my dear, but more importantly, they are not always careful with the people they are supposed to love. A tear slid down my cheek and splashed onto the page. This cottage is your escape hatch, she wrote, the words practically jumping off the paper. It is your start in life, a foundation that no one can take from you. Guard it fiercely. Use it to build a life on your own terms. Do not let them persuade you to sacrifice your future for their recurring mistakes. Your freedom, Deborah, is the most precious thing you will ever own. Live freely for me. I sat there on the attic floor and I didn't just cry, I sobbed. Not with grief for my grandmother, but with 20 years of pent-up validation. It wasn't my fault. I wasn't selfish. I wasn't crazy. She had seen it all. She had known, and she had tried to warn me. Hiding this letter wasn't a simple act of greed. It was the most profound betrayal of all. In that moment, any lingering whisper of guilt I had about my actions evaporated. This was no longer just my fight. I was now fulfilling my grandmother's last wish. I carefully folded my grandmother's letter and placed it in my inside jacket pocket, feeling its weight like a shield over my heart. Walking down from the attic, I was no longer a daughter revisiting a painful past. I was the owner of the property, and my first order of business was to secure it. The first call I made was to a 24-hour locksmith. As he worked, drilling out the old locks that had failed to keep me safe, I felt a sense of profound finality. Just as he was handing me the new set of keys, a car screeched to a halt at the curb. It was my brother, Roger. He looked different. His usual smirk was gone, replaced by a desperate, haggard look. "Deborah, you can't do this," he pleaded, walking quickly toward me. "You have to stop. Mom and Dad. They're staying in a cheap motel. They're a mess. What are we supposed to do?" His "we" was telling. He wasn't a bystander, he was a co-conspirator. When I didn't respond, his desperation curdled into familiar, ugly resentment. "This isn't you," he spat. "You were never supposed to be the ruthless one. My ventures were supposed to succeed. We were all supposed to be set for life. You've ruined the family's plan." The sheer, unfiltered entitlement of it all was almost laughable. I looked at him, not with anger, but with a kind of weary pity. "Your plan, Roger?" I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "You mean the plan that was funded by my stolen future?" Grandmother saw it. She saw all of you for what you were. She knew you would burn down my life to keep yourselves warm. The mention of her stunned him into silence. "It's over," I said, turning my back on him. "Goodbye, Roger." I stepped inside the house and closed the door, the click of the new deadbolt echoing the final closing of a chapter. After I closed that door, I blocked their numbers. I blocked Roger, my mother, my father. I didn't do it out of anger. I did it with the calm finality of a surgeon removing a tumor. My life with them was over. I had no interest in watching the fallout. In the months that followed, pieces of their new reality trickled back to me through a distant cousin who couldn't resist a bit of gossip. The news was exactly what you would expect. Their pride had led them straight to rock bottom. With no money and their reputation in Charleston's social circles shattered, they were forced to rent a small, cramped 2-bedroom apartment in North Charleston, miles away from the historic district where they had built their kingdom of appearances. For the first time in their adult lives, they both had to get jobs. My mother, Mildred, who once wouldn't be caught dead without her pearls, was now working as a cashier at a Harris Teeter grocery store. My father, Walter, his supposed heart condition miraculously manageable now that there were bills to pay, was doing part-time bookkeeping. And Roger, my golden boy brother, had, of course, moved in with them. At 40 years old, he was sleeping on a pull-out couch, still talking about his next big idea, a man-child trapped in the wreckage he helped create. Hearing this, I didn't feel a surge of triumph. I didn't feel joy. I felt nothing. A vast, quiet emptiness where a lifetime of obligation and pain used to be. It's a strange feeling, isn't it, when a toxic tie is finally cut? It's not always a celebration. Sometimes, it's just quiet. Have you ever felt that deafening quiet after the storm passes? I hired a property manager for the old house. It's now rented to a young family, and the income it generates goes directly into a college fund for my son, Michael. The house built on their lies is now securing my son's truth. The quiet that settled into my life wasn't an emptiness to be feared, it was a canvas. For the first time, I could paint a future that wasn't a reaction to my past. One sunny Saturday, on an impulse, I drove out to Folly Beach. The salt spray on the air, the cry of the gulls, it was the first place I had ever felt truly safe, with my grandmother. I wasn't looking for anything, but then I saw it. Tucked away on a quiet street, there was a small, white cottage with a bright blue door and a for sale sign out front. It was almost identical to the one I had lost. It felt less like a coincidence and more like a whisper from the past, a sign. A week later, I made an offer. The house I'd bought in Charleston was a weapon. This one? This was a sanctuary. When the keys were placed in my hand, I didn't feel the grim satisfaction of a battle won. I felt a light, bubbling joy I hadn't realized I'd been missing. The first weekend there, I didn't bring furniture. I brought my son, Michael, and my best friend, Lorraine. We ate pizza on the hardwood floors, our laughter echoing in the empty rooms. We painted the living room a color called sea glass, the three of us getting more paint on ourselves than on the walls. This wasn't a house of ghosts and obligations. This was a home built on the foundations of friendship and unconditional love, my chosen family. The next morning, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching Michael run along the shoreline, his laughter carried on the breeze. He was so carefree, so unburdened. And my grandmother's words came back to me. Your freedom is the most precious thing you will ever own. This is what she meant. It wasn't just the absence of pain. It was the presence of this. The joy, the peace. The cycle of trauma ended right here, with my feet in the sand. Watching Michael build his sandcastle, so oblivious to the war I had fought to give him that moment of peace, I finally understood the story's true lesson. For so long, I was haunted by a definition of family I thought was universal. We're all taught that blood is thicker than water, that family is an unbreakable, biological bond you must honor, no matter the cost. I spent 20 years drowning in that water, trying to earn a love that was never really there. Feeling guilty for wanting to swim to shore. I see now that I had it all wrong. Family isn't about shared DNA, it's about shared respect. It isn't about obligation, it's about choice. My real family wasn't in that historic house in Charleston, it was right here, on this porch. It was Lorraine, who answered every panicked phone call and was the sister my parents never gave me. It was Michael, who taught me that unconditional love is a quiet, steady presence, not a loud, chaotic demand. The people who see you, who lift you up, who fight for you as much as you fight for them, that is family. My parents and brother chose themselves, every single time. So, I finally chose myself. I chose my son. I chose peace. I let go of the titles of daughter and sister from a family that no longer deserved me, and I embraced the ones I had earned: mother, friend, survivor. So, I want to leave you with this question. Who is in your front row? Who is your chosen family? Take a moment to celebrate them in the comments, because the family you build is just as powerful, if not more so, than the one you were born into. Looking back on it all, from the quiet sanctuary of my new life, I realized the most important lesson wasn't about money or houses. It was about justice, karma, and the true meaning of forgiveness. Many people might call what I did revenge. But revenge is about inflicting pain, and that was never my goal. My goal was simply to end my own. The situation my parents and brother find themselves in now is not a punishment I created. It is the natural consequence of a lifetime of their own choices. Karma, I've learned, isn't a lightning bolt from the sky. It's the bill for your life's decisions finally arriving in the mail. Justice wasn't about destroying them, it was about restoring balance to my own world. But the question I'm asked most is, have you forgiven them? For the longest time, I struggled with that. How do you forgive people who aren't sorry? I came to realize that true forgiveness isn't for them at all. It's for you. Forgiveness is accepting the apology you never received. It's putting down the heavy bag of rocks you've been carrying for miles, not because they deserve your mercy, but because you deserve to walk without the weight. I forgive them for not being the parents I needed, which allows me to be the mother my son deserves. I forgive the past for what it was, so I can fully embrace the future for what it can be. If you take anything away from my story, let it be this. You cannot change the people who hurt you, but you can, and you must, choose how long you allow that hurt to define you. Your peace is worth fighting for. Thank you for listening. Be good to yourselves, and never be afraid to become your own hero.